Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where frontline sales leaders teach you how to build and scale an outbound sales team. Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Collin Stewart. Today, I'm joined by Bill Binch. He's the CRO over at Pendo. And we're going to talk about why you shouldn't just mail it in your hiring process, specifically around how we're going to hire great salespeople. And I think Bill probably has more experience than I for sure. But I've specifically on this topic, I've noticed that so many times back when we were first getting our feet off the ground that we didn't put as much time and thought and attention to the process, to generating a good top of the funnel of candidates that are really gonna be your top performers. So we didn't turn any attention to our process, and the end result was not good for us, not good for the customers. And since we've made that change, customer retention is up, revenue is up, people are happier. It's had such an impact on our business, which is why I wanted to bring Bill here to see what we can learn from Bill and have him share how Pendo does their hiring and recruiting and onboarding.
Right on. Sounds good.
Welcome to the show, Bill.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So this whole process, I mean, I think most people think I got to hire some salespeople. I'm going to throw an ad up on Indeed, and then I'm going to have a couple of phone calls, and then, I'm going to hire who I like. Right. What's wrong with that process?
Well, I mean, if you think about it at a really big picture view, Collin, and you think about what anybody in sales leadership has to deal with is, well, first of all, what do? You close deals, right? That's your job. Other than that, what else do you have to do? Well, I have to forecast what we're going to close and hopefully have some really good accuracy around that. Well, what else do you have to do? Well, I've got to learn a technology if you're in software like we are, and I've got to learn how to demo it. I've got to learn how to competitively differentiate it. I've got to be able to build value around those types of things. So you think about the role of selling and where we spend most of our time as sales leaders and sales managers, and it's in that stuff. And so when you just mentioned there that, maybe you didn't devote enough time to it, is you think about the other most important thing is to be selling deals, you need to have people that are in the seat and trained up. And I think that's just the area that a lot of people think about as a secondary priority, and it's not. I think it's really just an equal priority to those other things. And it just gets kind of, left behind or becomes an afterthought, as you mentioned there. And so I think that if you really think about world-class selling organizations, they're ones that really put a tremendous investment into that.
I think that's such an important piece that you just mentioned there. It's everybody's worried about hitting their or not hitting their quota because of, top of the funnel, but too many people have easily missed their quota or their goal for the year because they didn't have enough people to actually hit that. Right.
No question.
If you're down 5 salespeople and a 60-person team, like that's a lot to make up.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I just finished a couple hours ago our weekly forecast with our CFO and CEO. And one thing that I've never done previous in my career, but now we're doing at this company is we actually every week come in and talk about how much quota is our plan and how much quota do we have out on the street to cover it. And that quota is obviously not me going to a rep and saying, well, this quarter your quota is higher. That doesn't work. What it means is I have to be hiring reps to make sure that if I'm promoting someone out of the business or managing someone out of the business, that I'm keeping that delta between what the plan is and having enough quota on the street to make it. And so it goes right back to what the purpose of this topic is just how do you start with profiling the right people? How do you go and run the right recruitment process to interview? And then how do you get them onboarded and get them up to speed and ramped?
Right on. So totally agree. And it seems like even a step above that, like you just mentioned, is it starts with making sure that you're paying attention to what you've committed to and the capacity and making sure you're hiring to keep up with that capacity.
Yeah, no question. It's like I said, it's not something, I've always looked at that when I'm doing planning, but I don't go to, in my past, I've never gone to a weekly forecast meeting and pull that stat out. I've always just looked at it, here's the quota and here's the forecast and here's how we're thinking we're going to make it. And this one, we look at it because our quarters where we're very successful, we have the right amount of coverage or over assignment, as people would call it, of rep quota versus like what the company plan is. Mm-hmm. And on the quotas that are tough, you can go back and see a direct correlation that maybe that's gotten a little bit thinner. And so keeping up and keeping ahead of that's super critical, in addition to just doing all the right moves of like I said, I think that whole process starts with building the profile for who you need. And that I think has a lot to do with aligning to your corporate values. The next step after you have the profile is obviously the whole recruiting/interview cycle portion of it. And then once you're successful and you get somebody that you've landed and, they love you and you love them and they've come and joined your team, how do you get them up to speed? So I think of it in 3 stages there of like really the profile, recruiting/interviewing, and then onboarding.
Gotcha. So why don't we start with that profile? I imagine you're not just going to the internet and Googling, account executive job posting.
Sure.
This is probably something that comes from you, from the team. Talk to me about how you start building that profile.
Yeah, it's a pretty common question you get asked from other companies. Like, if I go and have a beer with another VP of sales, he or she will a lot of times say like, hey, who are you hiring, right? Who? And that's the proxy for what's your profile. And it's tough, and like you talk to some people and they might answer that question by saying, oh, I hire former people out of, Salesforce, Oracle, SAP, and they go with the big ticket shops. You might talk to another person and she says, well, no, I don't hire those people. I hire like the old Avis mentality. We're number 2, so we try harder. So I go and hire the second tier people. So like, the sugar CRM people or, something people that's not the monster in the business or in their specific space. I hire the second tier people because they hustle. And so you think about all those things, and those are all great things to think about. But realistically, I think it starts with your company culture. So that's looking externally. I think when you start thinking about building a profile, you have to start internally and say, what are the values that we have? And some companies that are really young, they haven't gotten to that stage where they've created values. And so in that case, you go and look at and you say, what do I want? I want gritty, scrappy hustler people, or do I want polished, refined professionals? And that's where you've got to think about that. And so, I'm fortunate at Pendo that I came and joined the company when it was 4 years old. And so they had already advanced to that stage where they had created their company values, and they had already, kind of published it, but had published those out to the organization. And so as I came in, first thing I asked the question was, do we hire against these values?
And what was the answer?
Very strongly. This place culturally is really big. I know I'm in front of a white wall, but Pendo's color is pink. And if you walked around the office where I'm looking at it, this place is covered in pink. And I use that as a metaphor because it's a consistent fabric through the offices, and all of our offices have like I'm sitting on a pink chair right now. They all have pink, but that's not a cultural value, but it shows the consistency of what we do. So, I'll give them to you real quickly. We have 7 values. It's a lot. And every year this company has an offsite meeting where they challenge, are the values keeping up with what we're doing, and should we adjust them? And so far the company's been in business, this is the 5th year. For the 4.5 years running, they haven't changed them. And so it's pretty cool. So the values are, number 1, promote life outside of work. And that's just the fundamental belief that we are more than just what we do during the day, and where we go to have a place of employment. Number 2, brutal honesty. And that's just a comment about, you have to be diplomatic. It's not saying that you have to be difficult, but, let's just be honest with each other. 3 is a maniacal focus on the customer. And I think that's hopefully a very consistent cultural value in every company that's probably 5 or 10 years old or less, because if you're not focused on the customer, then I'm not sure how you proliferate and grow it. Then we get into some of the really fun ones that I think are unique to this company, because those first 3 are ones I think you'd see in a lot of other companies. This one of the cool ones, my favorite one, is bias to act, which is kind of the ask for forgiveness, not for permission type of value, which I really like. It just says like, go do. We know we're going to run into some walls. We know we're going to make mistakes, but just do it. The next one is show me the data. Our software happens to be an analytical tool. So no surprise, one of our cultural values inside the company is let's use data to prove or disprove things. So that one's obviously fairly unique to the company. Next one is be transparent. And that's just about, with our customers internally, like it goes very closely hand in hand with the brutal honesty component, but let's be transparent about what we're doing. And so, we use dashboards here inside this company and we post them up. so everybody can see at any time where we're at against our hiring plan, where we are against our spend plan, where we are on our marketing leads generated, where we are in our sales. And it's just so that, there's no secrets, no one's left in the dark. And the final one is freedom and responsibility. So we have those 7 values. And as I came into the organization, I really asked the question. I said, those are great company values. We're hiring people for sales roles. Do we have some sales values? And I was fascinated, Collin, that they came back and said yes. And I was like, well, okay, are they kind of off the cuff? And they were like, no, let me show you. And they pulled out a document and they said, this is something, this is actually an interesting thing. We had a debate. The debate was, we have these values for salespeople. Mm-hmm. Should we give them to prospective interviewee candidates ahead of time, or should we let them see, test them to see if they find them, because they are out there. Like, you can find them. They're not on our company values are on our website, but if you go search LinkedIn, if you go do some things, you'll find the sales values for Pendo out there. And so we had this big debate on, do we give them to them and let them kind of adjust and hone their message to us, or do we just let it out there and fly and let the best of the best find them?
Mm-hmm. And where'd you end up on the?
So we decided that we were going to be very transparent about putting them out into the world, but we weren't going to just hand them to sales reps, because we were a little bit afraid of people coming in and kind of telling a story directly to those, mm-hmm. And us not seeing the true them. And I got to say, we've hired, probably over 25 people in the sales and revenue teams here in the last 6 months. And I'd say about 25% of the people have come in and brought them up in their interview and said, hey, I've seen these values. But, the core comment there is building the profile. You can build it a million different ways. I want years of experience. I want the type of sale, the product that they've sold, the vertical that they've sold to. Are they from, like I said, the big company or the small company? You can do all those things. But like I said, I think you really have to start looking internally and saying, what type of person do we want to hire, and what are the things that we believe in? And at this company, like I said, the culture is strong. They've literally managed people out of the business that didn't meet the cultural values, and just said, you're not the right fit for us, and you're not the right fit, or we're not the right fit for you. So so I think that profile, on a sales thing, you could ask me, Bill, what's the best thing you look for in a sales rep? And it's like, a history of performance, the hustle and the ethic to go get things. You get all those things. But I think those are the things that are going to be typical for I think those are going to be the typical things that are out there for everybody that's looking to hire somebody. And that's why I said starting internally makes you really think about what's important to you. And like I said, show me the data. That's not going to be a cultural value of every company, or here at this company, on the sales value side, work as a team is really important. If you think about a sales rep role, you're an individual contributor, but at the same time, how good are you at resource management? Because today in the high tech world, sales don't happen with just one person. You mm-hmm. have pre-sales reps, you have SDRs, you have legal, you have management, you have professional services people, you have all these people touching these deals. And so for us, when we're interviewing somebody, we're asking a lot of questions about, tell us about how you've sold deals. And if somebody is that person that's thumping their chest, I closed the deal, it's that's not the right cultural fit for us. That's not our ideal person. Our ideal person is a person that shares the success when they win, and also has someone to, shoulder the burden when they lose. And we think that's really important. So I think the profile, starting with your own values, the things that you care about, not the metrics they've closed this many deals or this average sale price or something like that. I think that's where you start.
Mm-hmm. So starts with the culture, not just of the company, but also of the team that they're going to sit on and join, right? Because you want to make sure you're finding not just people that are going to fit in the company, but really fit and mesh with that team. And it sounds like you guys have you all have a great team environment there.
Yeah. I mean, and as you noted, I've been at the company just since the start of this year. As I joined, the next step of that, once you get the cultural or the hiring values, is what do we do next? How do we go through the process of recruiting somebody, and what do we want to extract from them in the process, and what do we want them to learn about us? And so I was really fortunate that the team had already been thinking about this a lot when I arrived. And in my first couple of weeks on the job, we sat down with a bunch of the management team and we literally came together and said, well, let's go look on Glassdoor and see what people say about interviewing with us. And guess what? There's some pretty rough reviews of what the interview process was like. It was like, oh, I got asked the same old boring questions, or I didn't get followed up with in a timely manner. And it was like, shoot, like I want to do, it doesn't matter what stage you are. I want you to be handled with the utmost level of execution. And so we came up with a process where we said, how many interviews is each role going to take? And importantly, if there's 5 people that are going to interview you, Collin, I don't want you to get asked the same set of questions 5 times over. That sucks. That's just a shitty experience for them and for you, because you all come back having asked the same questions. So we decided we were going to break that up, and we decided there were areas that we want to explore. So we came up with 5 areas for every, this is a sales example, for every sales rep. Number 1, we want one person to really focus on goals and metrics, prospecting, and doing discovery. So that's one interview that someone goes through. Now, does that interviewer ask their own personal questions? Yeah, absolutely they do. But we really had a set of questions that we want to extract from each candidate on that topic. The next interview is on technical acumen and intellectual purity. How good are you at learning new things, and how savvy are you around technology, so that we can see if you're going to fit in with what we sell. Again, a product that's in what's called the product analytics category. Number 3, what's the culture fit? So like I said, back to our values, do I want to go have a beer with this person after work? Do I want to hang out with this person? Is this person going to contribute to the organization? Number 4 is selling against competition. Tell us about how you've fared in your different background jobs on selling against the competition. Then finally is deal management philosophy. So it's not in that order or anything like that. Those are just the 5 areas, but we came up with it. And when we set up someone to go through the interview cycle, everybody who's set up for the interview is assigned one of those areas. So I have to know, we have a list of the questions. I have to know the different sets of questions that we want to capture. And that way we get a fairly objective view of each candidate that we're talking to. And then, of course, I've been in high tech for 25 years. So there's a few questions that I want to ask that are outside any one of those. I'm going to spend the other part of the interview asking those, so that I understand more about them as a person. But we really try to give that some thought, because we didn't want to be out there, like I said, as this company that like brings you in and like has you come take a day off of work. You're sitting here in a conference room, and we're asking you the same sets of questions 5 times over. And you're thinking to yourself, geez, couldn't you guys just have all stood in the room at the same time and asked me these once?
Yeah.
So anyways, that's kind of the thought process of transitioning from the cultural values to how you put those into effect inside your organization.
Just one sort of tactical piece I'd love to understand. I love the process. I love the different steps and how everybody's got different questions. How do you collect that? Because I found what happens is, because we have a similar process, and not quite like this. We don't have the different questions, but we have sort of different interview styles that we run throughout the process. And what I found in the early days is, no matter how much we worked on having those different interviews and the things you wanted to ask, at the end of the interview, people would just sort of sit there and go, oh, yeah, I like that person. Right. And then all of a sudden you sort of biased. How do you make sure that is it just one person in the interview? Is it multiple people? How do you make sure you're getting that objective feedback versus just, I like this person, I didn't like this person? Yeah,
that's hard. It's a real hard problem. I mean, I had a recruiter one time. I thought this was a pretty savvy answer. A pro level recruiters, I asked how many people should be in the interview. And she answered back, she's like, how many people can veto this person? And that's your answer. And I was like, it's interesting, which means there's really, only a couple people that can veto. But going back to the culture fit, we end up having sales reps interview the sales reps. We have frontline managers interview the managers. And then, but we're still at the size of the company. Our CEO still meets with every candidate that we're serious about coming in the door. And so, to answer your question of how do you get that objective output, we first of all came up with these questions and we stuffed the bag or stuffed the turkey. We had like 1,000 questions and we were like, well, we can't ask all these. It's just too long of a process. So we had to hone it down. And that was a process of us all really working together collaboratively to figure out, I can't live without knowing this answer, right? And so we have 5 or 6 of those questions in there that across a group of managers that have been probably collectively managing over 100 years of experience, of combined experience, that we just had those ones. So we have those things. And then we use, like a lot of folks, we use an applicant tracking system, and essentially you have to rate the person. And it's kind of like a 1 through 5 scale. 5 is like hands down, hire this person today. 4 is yes. 3 is I'm unsure. 2 is I'm leaning away, and 1 is an absolute no. And so we look at those. And to your point about the objectivity, it's tough because it's very easy when you have somebody that comes in and ranks straight 2s from everybody. Okay, not the right fit for us. Straight 4s or 4s and 5s, again, super easy. But right now we were dealing with a candidate that came in, and a bunch of folks ranked this woman a 3 or a 4, and I ranked her a 2. And I had some pretty serious concerns about that. And so it was like, pump the brakes, let's have a talk about this one. And so we all had to get together, and we ended up going forward and giving that woman an offer because the team was persuasive. She came back and answered some things a little bit in more depth for me that I maybe didn't pick up in the first interview. But to make it objective, I'm not sure I have the perfect answer. I do think that if you go talk with companies that are in the recruiting space, they have a lot of best practices about how to make a smart hire when you have dissenting votes and stuff like that. And this was a case where I looked at it and I just had to ask myself, do I absolutely not want this person here, or were any of her answers so fatal that it just killed her ability in my mind to be successful? No, they weren't. So go ahead and persuade me. Tell me what I missed, or what did I hear incorrectly, or what did I not ask that I should have, to go in there and dive into it a little bit more deeply.
That's fair. We struggled a lot with the rate this candidate on a scale of 1 to 5.
Yeah.
And it was sort of, what we ended up coming with was, we have an ATS, but we actually broke it down into, I built a Google form. And then we basically had the cultural values, which were deal breakers. And so it was like pass, fail. Yeah. And then we had the sort of profile and the traits and the skills. And those were on a scale of, I think, 1 to 10. And then that enabled us to see, as we're going deeper and deeper into the process, is this candidate, are we learning more and they're improving, or are we learning more and they're going downhill because we're discovering that things weren't working so well?
So what you just talked about, I think, is really, really critical. The process of doing a sales interview is very uncommonly, like we 5 of us interviewed that person all in one day. It only spread over obviously a several week process. And what you said is their star rising as they go through the process, or is it sinking? And the thing about this example I just gave you about this woman that I scored a 2 was, after the interviews were done, that's when the energy can kind of fall off and fall down the curve because they're not in front of you. And I gotta say, she kept up the intensity. And that was one of the things I noted was, okay, if getting a job is essentially a sales cycle, she's selling herself to want to come work inside of this organization, then she's doing a really good job of staying top of mind to me. And so her intensity level stayed pretty high. And that was one of the things I noted. And during that stage, we were out checking her references, we were back channeling her, and we were asking her for some more data. And it didn't wane, it didn't fall off. And so to your point, like, I'd say that to what you guys do, her star was rising as we were talking about that through the process.
Perfect. So maybe just give me a high level of your process. So you build a profile, you drive, top of funnel to it. So you're driving candidates into the top of the funnel. Then you have how many interviews are you doing in total?
We do 5 on the sales side.
Gotcha. And so each one has, so I imagine the CEO's in there probably near the end. Are they the last one?
It's not that prescriptive because sometimes just schedules don't work that way. I'll say this: he's not the screener of the candidate, so the person's got to get through the screen before he gets included into the process. Yeah, but it might be a different sequence. No, essentially, this is what we do. We obviously recruit, people come to us and apply. We get sources from all over the place. And once we have those people, we do a phone screen with a sales recruiter who knows really the traits that we're looking for. And she helped us build these questions and helped us build the profile. So she's been there with us from the very beginning. At that point, so she's pretty good hit rate is what I'm saying on bringing us people that look like the folks that we want to hire. After that, we initiate the process. Like I said, there's not a specific order to how we go through those questions. It's just, it is. But importantly, in this world, Collin, it's not just about like pulling and extracting information out of them. It's about selling yourselves. I mean, it is so competitive right now for top quality talent. And so if you think that you're just going to run 5 interviews and just pepper somebody with questions for 55 minutes and be like, hey, let me answer your questions for 5 minutes, that's just the most awful process in the world right now. So what like for me personally, like what I'll do is I'll break up an interview of, the first, I'll call it 10% of the time of me talking and setting the table of, look, this is what our mission is. This is what the role is. And this is what that role looks like and how we're thinking about it and how we're growing. Right. So those are the types of things that I set the table, and that tends to drive some back and forth. It's not me only presenting out and nothing coming back. Normally people start asking questions already. So instead of like, hey, let's wait to the last 10 minutes of the meeting. And so that provokes some, there's my chair. That provokes some like good back and forth that warms the candidate up. And, like a lot of people like can challenge that and say like, nah, I like to jump in with the tension interview right away. Right? Look, I like to get someone warmed up because I want to see them at their best. At that point, I'll typically transition into like setting the agenda. Look, this is what I want to learn about you today. And I'm very clear about like, look, we as a group are going to interview you over 4 or 5 criteria. And here's what those criteria are. The one that I'm going to explore today is X. And I'll go down that road with them. And then I'll add my own questions. And then I'll reserve some time for them to ask about us. And that's my chance to sell Pendo on that person, on why we're a great company to work with, why if they're looking at that role that we offer a better than the rest type of environment to come work inside. So I think really we think a lot about that as our process. And then once we go through that, a couple things can happen. Sometimes people just nail it and knock the ball out of the park, so to speak. And so, we'll move forward with checking references, and I'll come right back to that, and getting an offer out to them. Other people, sometimes if we have a concern, especially like around the technical acumen, if we think that the product that they've sold is more simplistic than what we sell, we might ask them to come run us through a demo of what they sell and help us understand, how they attach their product to value as opposed to just selling a product and pushing technology on you. So there could be some steps in there. And then lastly, I mentioned the reference. We take that really seriously here. I'll tell you, I have a general rule. If I'm hiring someone that's in a management position or higher, so someone that's a regional manager, regional director, VP or whatever, before I even start the process, one of the questions I ask them is, who are your references going to be? I'm not going to call them. I'm giving you my word, but I want to know who they're going to be. And the first thing I look for, Collin, is do they give me names of people they previously reported to? And that's the critical thing. And if they don't, I won't move forward with the process until I come back and say, hey, Collin, look, I looked at these references. These all look like peers of yours. Like I certainly understand you're not giving me your current boss. If your current boss doesn't know you're looking, that's totally understandable. But your past bosses, that's who I'm going to want to talk to, because I'm not looking for them to, give me dirt on you. But what I'm looking at them to tell me is, look, Collin you're great at doing this. And by the way, there's some areas that if you were working for me, I'd still want to be developing him in, those areas of growth. And that's what I want to talk to that person about. Last thing I want to do is go do a reference and have somebody tell me how much they love the person and that I'd adopt them if I could. Like that doesn't do me any good. What does me good is, hey, I'm serious about hiring this person. And if I do, tell me how I'm going to make them more successful than they were working for you. And so from that perspective, if someone's a management role, I ask, and if I don't see previous managers, I pause right there and just tell them, look, I'm going to need to talk to previous managers, because if you don't have that, then that makes me worry about what kind of employee you are. And then just for individual contributor roles, same thing. I don't ask for the references up front, but if I look and get references and it's all, the person that was their seatmate or, their peer over on the customer success side or something like that, it's like, hey, hold up, time out. I need to talk to somebody that actually managed you in this world.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
References are so key. We, in our process, we'll actually say, and I didn't think of this, we stole this from a book, but we'll say, when I call your boss, what will they say? But it's not if, and it's not, will you, and we tell them at the very beginning of the process, I'm not going to call them now. I'm going to get you to make introductions for us when we're ready. Right. And then throughout the whole process, it's when I talk to your boss, what will they say? when I talk to them. And so it sets up the whole, I find we get different feedback based on from when we were just sort of asking what would they say versus what will they say.
You'd mentioned that to me, and that's I'm gonna have to incorporate that in, because that's just really good, because there is the implicit or explicit line that we are going to go do that. And I think that's just really savvy. I mean, you say you stole it from a book. There's a book out there that I think a lot of folks, especially in technology, have read now, called The Alliance, written by Reid Hoffman, the guy that started LinkedIn. And he just has some really mature concepts in there around, like, this is the stage where you're setting expectations. And, to have an expectation that you're going to come work with me for the next 40 years of your career is pretty unrealistic. So knowing that you're going to come in and, he talks about this value exchange of, how much you're giving to the company and how much you're getting from the company, and making sure those balance out. And there's a day that those go out of whack, that you're giving more than you're getting back, or vice versa. You're not giving as much and the company's not getting back. And you just got to be ready for a very real conversation on both ways, that, like, hey, there's something more out there for me. I can grow faster at another organization, make more money, have a bigger role, whatever. And there's another time that the company has to come to you and have that same conversation, which is, this is just not working.
It's the same book where they talk about the tours of duty, right?
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, we read that, and then Powerful by, is it Patty McCord?
I don't know.
I think the two sort of go hand in hand. They talk about, they have very similar views on hiring, and this is, we're not going to hire you for 40 years. We're hiring you to do a job, and the company's going to grow and you're going to grow. And if the two keep up, that's great, but that's sort of the minority case.
Going back to what you said, I mean, I love the perception there of, when we call your former boss, what's he or she going to say? It's just a great question.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. It's we stole that from Who, the book. It's the guys, I think it's him and his dad wrote Top Grading, and then him and his son wrote this with somebody else. But yeah, fantastic book. That's what we based our whole process on. But now I'm going to steal your set fixed questions piece. I'm going to tack that onto the end, because we basically do a screen, and then we do a Who interview, which goes through the resume, and it's got specific types of questions that you're going to ask. Yeah. And then we always come up with, okay, where were the gaps from that Who interview? Where are the gaps that we sort of missed out on? But I think that's the area for our process where it's a little bit less structured, and I think more structure, like what you have here, of like, here's the 3 or 4 types of interviews. I think that could be a big game changer for us.
That's sweet. Good.
Great. So you've got a strong top of funnel because you're recruiting the right people. You've got a great process. So you've made that hire. And of course, once you're starting to realize, it sounds like through that process, once you realize, hey, this is somebody who is truly a top performer and is going to be a top performer here at Pendo, you start that closing process. So what does that look like? And then next question would be sort of, once we've got them closed, where do we go from there?
Yeah. Before I dive into that, you made a really interesting comment about a strong top of funnel. 2 ways to describe that. Strong could be a lot of people, and strong could be quality of people. And what I'd kind of just riff on that with you on, Collin, here, is that we're like a lot of fast growth startup companies that, are 4 or 5 years into business, and that, we're trying to attract top talent, and it's hard. So I never have enough people. By doing the profile, by doing the questions, that doesn't, necessarily say that, I mean, like, I'm sure if you're Google, you get thousands of applicants a day. But when you're Pendo, or you're predictable revenue, or you're, a small or medium-sized company, obviously you have to go work for it. So the thing that I look for in that is, well, let's get our hit rate at least. And we manage and you talked about this, the funnel, the top of the funnel. We manage our candidate pipeline just like we manage a sales pipeline. Are we advancing the stages? Are we getting closer to a deal, so to speak, and doing that? And so the thing that I really look at is how are we doing from an acceptance rate of when we touch people? How many candidates how many candidates to job offer, how many candidates to acceptance, that type of thing is what we look at. So yeah, like when you said strong top of funnel, there's a couple ways to think about that one.
I love that you get your pipeline metrics even for the recruiting funnel.
Yeah, so we do. So yeah, once we go through the process, get some references, this is where I think, again, like, I don't want to quite say mail it in, because I don't want to imply the wrong thing, but this is where I think that a lot of companies can really improve their processes. This is the stage from when that person is going to go and probably give notice at a company if they're valued, and you hope they are, right? You hope you hired just a ringer. Then they're probably going to get a counter offer or two. They're going to get, persuaded, their arm twisted, whatever you want to call it. Someone's going to try and keep them if they're good. And so this is where you don't back off the gas. You don't just be like, sweet, got the offer out, hopefully that person accepts. This is where you pour the charm on, right? Like, again, you're selling still. You're trying to attract talent to your organization. And so this is the stage where, you're doing the things where you're like, if a person says, oh, look, I'm going to go give notice and I'm going to take a couple weeks. Like, this is where I find out like the little things in life. What are you going to do while you take a couple weeks off? You're going to hang out. You're going to, coach your kids soccer. You can go to Hawaii. Oh, I'm going to Hawaii. Where are you going? Which island? And like, I'll do little things like I'll find, not to be, kind of like a stalker, but I'll find out where they're staying. I'll get them to tell me where they're staying. And if it's a hotel and something like that, that's the type of thing. Maybe you send a bottle of champagne to them and their spouse so that, they kind of get this, wow, like this room's great. And hey, the Pendo team's looking forward to working with you a couple of weeks. And that's where I think you want to be, keeping up. And so that's just kind of the courtship. And then once they start, again, you've probably done this. Like I've worked for 5 or 6 companies in my career. I've come into some of them and there's no computer for me. And that's a couple days away. So you're,
Totally my thumbs.
Yeah, and these companies live on email, right, or on Slack or whatever, and like you're not even communicating, and then like your boss is traveling, and you can't always not prevent that. So like but the reality is that first day to me is really important, and I've seen a lot of companies, and I'm not saying I'm perfect here, but I'm trying to emulate some of the things that I've seen. Is that first day, like if you can walk in. And like you come off the elevator and you're in the lobby and you come to the lobby and like there's no one there. How great would it be if your boss is waiting for you in the lobby when you step off the elevator or off the stairs or whatever. And you're like, Collin, welcome here. And you're like, hey, Bill, nice to see you. It's like, hey, come on over. And you walk them through and you start introducing them to some of the people. A lot of times, like we've had things where we'll like, if it's a Monday, that's our sales meeting. We start the sales meeting. We tend to start people on Mondays is we have people come a little bit later in the day so that they can come in and start in our sales meeting. We come in, we introduce them there and people clap and, it just feels good. And then by the time you do get to their desk, we like to and again, sometimes like the speed doesn't always work on this, but we always have their computer. We always have their accounts. We're a small enough company that's not like a big, long process. But if I have the time, if I have more than a week, I'll have your business cards ordered and have them sitting on your desk. We'll give you some swag. We'll have some Pendo shirts and hats and hoodies and stuff like that waiting. And then through the day, we try to plan your day so it's not just like, hey, Collin, welcome. I'll see you at 5 p.m. We try to plan it so that, we set you up with that sales meeting. We have you go to a lunch with a couple of folks so you kind of start building some, like mentors or at least friends inside the organization. We'll try to have some meetings scheduled where we introduce you around the rest of the organization because it's not just a sales thing. And we'll do some fun things like that because my goal is that you go home to whoever you talk to, your spouse, your significant other, your friends, and they're like, hey, how was your first day? And you're like, it rocked. And they're like, why? And they're like, man, like I came off the elevator and they're waiting for me. They took me to lunch right away, came back and we went to the sales meeting. They introduced me, everybody cheered for me. Then I went into this meeting afterwards and people like started teaching me like, look, these are the things you really need to know about working at this company. Like that kind of experience. I got t-shirts, they're sending me to a new hire training class starting next week. And like those types of things are the little things that someone comes in and goes, man, and those are the people that go on Glassdoor then and write this killer review for you.
Because that's, the Glassdoor review is just the case study of your hiring process, your recruitment process, right? You want to continue getting more customers. You want to continue getting more great people. You need those case studies, whether they're customer case studies or Glassdoor testimonials. So that's huge that you do that.
Yeah. And like I said, a lot of what I'm talking about is some aspirational things that we're working towards. I think we have a good basis, but even now I look on Glassdoor and I'll see like no one followed up with me. And so like breaking up is hard to do, as they say, and it is. And, I made the call just Monday this week to a candidate that had come in and gone through the process. And my recruiter said, do you want me to call and tell them we're not moving forward? And I said, no, I want to handle this one because I know that they're going to be pretty disappointed. They put a lot of effort into this and they're going to want to hear from the hiring, team, not
the recruiter.
But they want to hear like, well, why aren't you hiring me? And you'd be like, well, we found somebody better. Like if someone told me that, I'd be like, well, like, so I can grow, what did they do better that I didn't want to do? And that might be hard for the recruiter to answer. So I wanted to take it. And it wasn't, like, I gotta say, it's not my favorite call of the week, but I made the call and did it. And so,
how deep do you go on that call?
I'm pretty candid with somebody. This person went through the full process. Mm-hmm. Like I said, went pretty far along. And this one, we had a specific location that we were hiring somebody, and we had one spot. And the other person that came in was, not from years of experience, but just from the complexity and sophistication of their answers, was just a level above this other person. I told this individual, I said, look, the person we talked to just had a better mastery of, the sales cycle for the type of sale that's analogous to what we sell. And she asked a few questions around that, and we spent a little bit of time, but at least she heard it directly from me. Mm-hmm. So like I said, so I hope on Glassdoor that we do close off, because like I said, it's not my favorite call, but it's kind of, someone committed a lot of time to you. You need to do that.
It's definitely an important one. It's never the most fun one, but it can be sometimes the most important one to make.
Yeah, no question. And then, the last topic on that, on kind of the onboarding piece that I tell you, Collin, is I remember in the early Marketo days, we had a board member named Bruce Cleveland, and Bruce had been the chief marketing officer at Siebel. And I never worked at Siebel, but I always considered Siebel to be really well-trained people. And I remember he used to come to every board meeting. He'd be like, Bill, when are you going to hire a sales training and enablement person? And I was like, hey, man, I got this. Like, I was too smart to hear his advice. I was like, hey, I got this. We're making our numbers. And he was like, I know, but there's a day when you're going to go from 3 reps to 7 reps to 10 reps, and you're going to outstrip your ability to do this. So don't delay hiring. Don't hire the sales trainer when you need them. Hire mm-hmm. them like when you don't need them. Hire them when you think you got this. And I was too smart to hear those words. So every time I see Bruce now, Collin, I go up and hug him. I go, hey, did I ever tell you were right? And he goes, yeah, every time you see me, man.
Yeah.
So my point of that whole riff is, the next step is we hire these people. We've just gone through all this stuff we talked about building profiles, about competing for talent to get them in, like building potentially a process for how you interview and get them on, reference checking them, setting expectations, and you get them on board, you welcome, you make them feel great, you're great. And then it's like, okay, don't leave them at the bus stop now, keep going. And so that's the training piece. And, sales training and enablement is like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. It's never finished, right? Once you get to one end, you go back to the other end and start over, because it started to rust and degrade. And so you're never done training, because your new hire training never stops evolving. And so I think companies, again, like another thing that companies shortchange is, if I have a choice to hire another salesperson I can put on quota, or I can hire a sales ops person or a sales trainer, everybody always elects to hire the sales rep. And if you just don't have world-class training, I think you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage, because there's just so much that goes on. And so, like I said, I've been here about a half a year, and coming out of Marketo, to where we had no sales training and enablement, it was just like learn by osmosis on the floor, to where now there's a fairly regimented and rigorous process for how you go through there. I'm trying to take the best things that I've gotten from there. And then I've gone out, and we actually have a sales training and enablement person here at Pendo. He's been going out to a lot of great companies, like Zendesk and New Relic, companies that are hiring, kind of what I'd consider high caliber SaaS software reps, and talking with them about what's your new hiring program look like once people are onboarded, what's your ramp expectations, once they're ramped, how do you continue professionally growing somebody through the organization, things like that. And I think, like that's an area that, I believe that solution consulting, your pre-sales reps, your sales ops, and your sales training are always areas that you underinvest in. And so I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best inside of Pendo here to make sure that those are real, legitimate organizations inside this company.
Right on. Do you know Chris and Taft over at Smart Recruiters?
No, I don't.
So both have been guests on the podcast. Chris is really strong on the coaching and onboarding training side, and Taft is his counterpart, always does the sales enablement from the technical side. Those two guys are a great 1-2 punch. We've had them both on the podcast. I couldn't tell you the name of the number of the episode if I if my life depended on it. But if you have a search, if you're listening, you have a search, through our podcast. We did Taft. Taft came on first. We talked about Salesforce. He showed us how to build some really cool stuff in Salesforce, really tight integration with outreach. And then Chris came on and showed sort of the other side of that, which is, how do you, once you hire these great people, how do you train them? How do you continuously level them up and sort of push them to be better?
I'll have to reach out because I love that. Like my sales enablement guy, Mike, would love that. I love that. I love getting into the mix of that because, that's what the role of a CRO does. Like certainly, like I do all the forecasting, all the messaging, thinking about what the demo script and what the demo messaging is, and value proposition creation, things like that. But that investing in the people, what you just said there, and like you brought up a really interesting thing when you said the integration between Salesforce and outreach. I got to tell you, it's hard today. Not only do you come into a company and have to learn a whole new technology, a whole new set of people, whole new value proposition and messaging framework, who the competitors are, how to price quote, how to demo the software, all this stuff. But the tools today it's amazing. And look, I'm guilty. I was part of this and being part of the team that built up Marketo and that, that's yet another tool. But like I look at when we hire a new hire person here and, we've got Salesforce for CRM, we've got Exactly for sales compensation, we've got Outreach for, kind of doing prospecting and demand generation work. We use Marketo and reps have an access point into that. We use Sales Navigator. We have like this plethora of tools, and just coming on board and learning, forget about all the other stuff I said about the messaging and what your company's about. They have to learn like a technology stack. And so it's a challenge. So I'll have to reach out to the Smart Recruiter guys. That sounds like a good place to get some valuable info.
Happy to make an intro to both of them. They're both great guys.
Cool.
So we've talked about training. So you've got the sort of their first day taken care of, but I imagine training doesn't end with the first day. Like you said, they've got all of these tools. How do you build in that sort of that training into their onboarding process?
Yeah, a lot of ways to skin the cat there. New hire training is fairly straightforward, right? Because you're going to come in and you are going to cover tools, you're going to cover HR and benefits, you're going to cover company level things. And then you're going to get into role, right? And that's the first thing you have to think about is, we're hiring at the same time and doing new hire classes with SDRs, pre-sales consultants, sales reps, and sales reps at different levels, corporate sales reps up to strategic sales reps, customer success reps, a lot of professional services folks, so all people that touch the customer. And there's a component that, it's kind of a diminishing thing that it starts off as a big group. And then as it goes on for the days, it gets smaller and gets more focused on the roles. And that was a really big learning for us because we had a training a few months ago and we always do a survey afterwards. And a lot of the survey was we're delivering it across multi-locations, and B, we're delivering it against multi-levels of roles, and it just wasn't, one size fits all wasn't connecting well. And so we had to break it out. So we actually do breakout tracks based on role because, there's some roles that, like we have a demo training class. Well, this role doesn't have a demo. So I'm not going to, force that person to sit through that movie if they don't have to. So we think about by roles in the new hire training class. And then for the ongoing training, there's a lot of ways to think about it. You can be like, hey, like use a college analogy. There's the 101 topics, the 201 topics, that type of thing. You can think about doing it by roles, certainly. The way we think about it is by value proposition. And so we really think about the value that we serve to our customers, and we put training underneath those. And that literally, could be, presentation skills. Well, how does presentation skills work back into your value props? Well, we make the linkage that if I'm a more clear communicator to you, and that's by the result of me going through a program that makes me more articulate, well, then that value prop is going to probably come across more crisply to the buyer, and you're probably going to have a higher conversion rate and potentially, winning them as a customer. So with us, we do it through value on the ongoing basis.
Oh, that's fantastic. Bill, this has been, I feel like I've learned so much. What have we missed in the interview process? Have we missed anything?
Just a couple takeaways. I think that I'd leave behind is like I said, number one, your hiring profile, look inside before you look at outside. Before you start thinking about, what companies you want to recruit from, look inside and make sure that you've done the fact check against, what you're looking to have inside your organization. And whether that's a prescriptive value set of values or whether that's just, these are the types of skill sets that we want to have inside. I'd start there. Number two is there's a lot of great tools out there. Like we talked about Glassdoor, there's a lot of great tools out there to go and see, well, how do I look, today? If a recruiter is thinking about I'm paying somebody a recruitment fee and I'm thinking about sending this candidate to company A or company B. Well, I guarantee you that recruiter is looking at Glassdoor and looking at and talking to former people that worked here. So what's your reputation like? And what are you doing to make it so that people that are here are jazzed up about that? So I think that's a key thing. I'm not a believer of being prescriptive and telling everybody they have to go build the script of questions they're going to go ask. But like I said, think about the experience that the interviewee is going through and just be thoughtful that you're not putting them through 3 or 4 haphazard interviews and that they're being asked the same question. So like, is that all the way on the other pendulum that there's a scripted and everybody has a role? Maybe not, but just be aware would be kind of the takeaway I'd put on that one. Then the last one is once you've kind of landed the candidate, the selling doesn't stop there. Make sure that you're thinking about the time between when they leave their company, when they come, think about their first day, their first week and what that experience looks like. And then think about, like you just said, the ongoing training and the career development stuff.
Bill, I feel like I could talk to you about this all day, every day, and we just keep going, and this would be a 24-hour long podcast. But I'm sure you got other things to do, and I know I actually have our VP of Sales first day. It's her first day, so I've got to go and do the walk through the building. And yes, we did have her computer and her email and her Slack and all that ready.
Nice.
And the desk all set up. So I've got to get to that. But before I go, I've got 2 questions, and one's really a question, and one is, well, we'll get to that. So second last question. You alluded to this earlier, but you didn't, you just sort of left us hanging. So I want to close the loop. What are some of your favorite interview questions?
It's a great one. My favorite interview question is 2 words, and it's why you? And Collin, that can, a lot of people say, why are you the best fit for the role? Why should we hire you? Why are you different than the other candidate? But it comes down to why you. And I think if there's something I can leave behind, if you're a candidate preparing to go interview for a job, someone somewhere in your cycle is going to ask you that question. And if you don't have something that you can answer in 30 to maybe 45, max 60 seconds that talks about, not what you've done, but encapsulates what you've done, but what you're going to do for that organization and differentiates you, then go back to the drawing board before you go on site and do that. So that's my favorite question, because you see people that are putting up a product and go take it to market and they're wonderful at selling it. And you see some people just knock that ball out of the park and you're like, wow, why you? Like, I just want to hire you. And you see people miserably fail. And you're like, really? You do this for a living and you can't even sell yourself that well. But that's a moment where, not in a boastful way, but in a confident way, you need to deliver the goods. So why you is my absolute favorite question that I ask.
I love that, because it makes them think on their feet a little bit. I don't imagine, too many people are coming in, you're trying to sell yourself, but you're really thinking about the company. You're thinking about the company, not necessarily how am I going to sell this part of me. So
how do you package yourself up that's meaningful for that organization to walk away? And how do you do that crisply in like a 30 or 45 second sound bite so that it's not a 4-minute run-on?
Mm-hmm. And it's not, I'm going to work harder and I'm more loyal and all that, generic stuff. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. We just had a round of interviewing, a couple rounds of interviewing, and I stole your why you question from our pre-interview, and I used that in all their interviews. It was great. So thank you.
Right on.
So we got a couple minutes left here. Our last segment, which is always a surprise segment. I never tell anybody about this. We call it Ring Ring. So it's your opportunity to promote Pendo, but you got to cold call me.
All right. So let me get this straight. So I got to pick up the phone, give you a call. I get you on the phone, and I got a chance to grab you.
This is a cold call. I want to hear your cold call script or how you would, if you're cold calling me, what that process would be for Pendo.
You want to know the process, or you want me to go into role and give you?
No, this is we're role playing here.
All right, got it. Yeah. So hey, Collin, this is Bill from Pendo. How you doing?
Good. How you doing, Bill?
I'm wonderful. Listen, thanks for taking my call today. The key reason I gave you a call is that Pendo helps our customers understand their user sentiment. And so the I was spending some time on G2 Crowd and Trust Radius, and I was seeing some reviews of what your company's product does. And I saw that there were some comments about how your user interface could be better, about how the product could be more easily navigatable, and that there were some features that were people looking for. That's a problem that Pendo helps our customers solve. And so I wanted to reach out to you and see if that would be something you'd be interested in talking with me about.
Doesn't sound useful at all. We have a product manager and a UI UX manager. They're both looking at those reviews and working on it. That's
great. That's great. We find that most of our folks are. The problem is that they can't measure it, the impact that those folks, the work that those folks, the UX manager and the UI person and the product management team have done. And so that would be my next question is, how do you measure that your customers love your product?
Well, we're measuring that with, we can see the retention metrics, we can see the daily active users and mix panel, and we also do NPS surveys.
That's excellent. That's excellent, because that's exactly what Pendo does, except a little bit more. Yeah, that's my last company.
Who does?
That's exactly what Pendo does, except a little bit more. The important part about Pendo is that we not only allow you to analyze what your users are doing, but we allow you to take action. And that's the difference of buying a product versus a platform, is we have those two together in one seamless system. And so, like I said, analyzing what your users are doing, their monthly active users, that type of stuff, that's great. But number two, you need to be able to take action. And then, like I said at the beginning, you really need to be able to measure it. And Pendo is the only company that allows you to bring those three things together and be able to do that. And so that's what's different about us. That's the thing that we do that no one else does. And that's where I thought, based on the reviews I saw on G2 Crowd and Trust Radius, that might be of some interest in talking with us about.
Bill, I think you got the meeting. Nice work, man.
Right on. Cool. Note to self, next time I'll watch one of your interviews before I jump on.
Yeah, I only started doing this probably 7 or 8 episodes ago. And yeah, it's great because you can tell if people have watched them before, because they're either ready or not ready. I'm not offended if you haven't watched any, because it's I'm talking to fairly busy people that haven't heard of the show before. And even if they have heard of the show, they're also really busy people.
Right.
But I think it's more fun when they haven't, because you get a chance to put them on the spot, and you get to see, hey, we've talked about, all of the things that Pendo does. And then it's sort of the opportunity to really prove, like, hey, Bill's a great salesperson. Right.
It's a sharp move, man. I'll have to have my team watch this so they can come and fine tune me, because I admittedly don't do a lot of cold calling these days, but I'm sure they have some probably better entry techniques on getting in there. But I'll have to have them help school me so I get a little bit better.
Absolutely. Maybe we'll get you back on. We'll give you another shot at it.
Right on.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, Bill. For anybody that's out there that's from Pendo that's listening, I want you to reach out. Let me know how Bill did on his cold call. I want some tips, some pointers, ways you think he could improve, and then reaching out to the audience. Was I still too soft on him? Should I have hit him with some more objections? It's hard. I find it hard sometimes when you don't know the product as well. So I'm really struggling to reach for good objections, because everything you say sounded pretty logical. But do I need to work on my objection handling? Let me know. Thanks again for joining us, Bill.
Right on. Take it easy, Collin.
You too, man.
Bye bye.
See ya.